the US, the UK, UAE, Singapore, India, and Australia. We are a membership organization, and our members include trailblazers such as Indra Nooyi, the former CEO of PepsiCo, as well as business leaders such as Keshav, Murugesh, Narry Singh, and Sandeep Sakharkar, who also happen to be our speakers today. I will now briefly introduce our three speakers and then hand over to Narry Singh, who will narrate today's series. So, starting with Narry Singh, he is an executive partner and managing director of Alex Partners. He is a trusted advisor to CEOs and boards on the fascinating topic of digital transformation. He is a seasoned Silicon Valley CEO and founder and has helped create 2 unicorns. Today, he will host our Tech Talk series, which will feature businessmen Keshav Murugesh and Sandeep Sakharkar. Keshav is a group CEO of WNS, which is a listed company on the New York Stock Exchange. He has decades of turnaround experience across ITC, NASDAQ-listed Syntel, and WNS Global. He was the past chairman of NASCOM in India and is the current chair of CII in the UK. He is a mega icon and was recently featured in the National Geographic under their Mega Icon program. Sandeep is a seasonal technology leader, adept at driving digital transformation at scale in large enterprises. Over his career, spanning 3 decades, Sandeep has helped large global organizations such as GXO Logistics, where until recently he was CIO and EXCO member, Foot Locker Inc. and Johnson & Johnson transform to achieve successful business outcomes through modern technology and data-driven digital transformation. He is currently using his expertise and experience to help an AI-driven data and process improvement-focused startup, which is currently in stealth mode, to take off and establish itself. Both Keshav and Sandeep will briefly talk about their journeys and share some of their business mantras, which have made them successful. They will also discuss how businesses navigate technological change, particularly with AI, and what next for digital transformation, and how Indian diaspora leaders can drive and influence change. So, without further ado, I will ask Narry to start today's session. Thank you, Narry.
Nina, thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for joining this UK Tech Talk. I'm really excited, genuinely, to speak to 2 amazing executives on everything from their personal journeys, as Nina mentioned, to the UK tech system, the ecosystem, the role of AI, the role of India and Indians and Indiaspora in the overall movement around tech and beyond. So our plan today is I'll host and facilitate the discussion, but really it's about our 2 guest speakers. And our plan is to start with a few points about their personal journeys. We will touch on specifically the UK tech system and the ecosystem, partly because it's a UK Tech Talk, and finally end on a few rapid fire questions that should be hopefully amusing and fun. We will leave some time for the audience Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to start putting them in the chat, and our team from Indiaspora will help us facilitate some Q&A through those questions that you submit. So that's the general plan. Without much ado, let me just start by our first question. Sandeep, perhaps starting with you, and then Keshav. You both have, as Nina just mentioned, had some amazing careers. All of us have had our ups and downs. All of us have had a very interesting journey that has led us to where we are today. Can you perhaps, Sandeep, start by sharing, maybe in a couple of minutes, what you think were a few pivotal moments in your journey that changed your career, good or bad, and what did you take away from those? And then Keshav, maybe you can follow as well.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Narry, and it's great to be on this panel with Keshav, Nina, and yourself. Thank you to Indiaspora as well for the very first UK Tech Talk. So coming to your question, Narry, we all have amazing stories in our career. For me, I'd say there's one incident I'd like to call out. And very early in my career, I never trained to be in technology industry. I was a mechanical engineer doing some selling of technical machine tools in the early part of my career. And as luck would have it, somehow I realized that I had an aptitude for understanding how to use systems. But if it was not for one of my bosses who had pushed me into joining a sort of IT so-called project, I would have never chosen this career. So that was a very pivotal moment. It was sort of, late 90s. The Indian ecosystem was just starting to evolve with a lot of multinationals coming in. And the gentleman in question was an American gentleman, my boss, my first boss from Georgia, Atlanta. And I say, hey, go and do this, do this project. And my God, I never thought I had a flair for this. So that was such a pivotal moment because since then, pretty much my entire career has been in some shape and form related to technology, though more about transformation and driving change. But I think that's an amazing lesson there that which I use with my kids as well now. Follow your passion, follow what you love. You never know what will click in your mind. And if you do what you love, then you love what you do and you get better at it.
Well, in Sandeep, it also sounds like you were lucky enough to have a good boss who also was a good mentor, which is, I
Absolutely.
think what a lot of the young people aspire to today, which hopefully we'll get talking about that as well. Thanks, Sandeep. Keshav, what about you?
Yeah, Narry, first of all, thanks for having me here. It's inspirational, frankly, to be in a panel that has you and Sandeep. I just heard about your war stories, so it's really fantastic to be here. And also great to be in an Indiaspora kind of an event because all of us are members as well. I think it's very important that all of us contribute in this fashion and learn from each other. Going to my own little story, I must tell you, I come from a very middle-class kind of background, grew up in Chennai and in Vizag, studied actually at Don Bosco School in Chennai, probably, played cricket against MR at one time. MR is the founder of Indiaspora, but I was probably a few years junior to him. And then made my way to Vizag, where I finished my chartered accountancy. So interestingly, I'm an accountant running a tech company, which demonstrates that you can do anything if you have your heart to it. I finished my accountancy there and then applied to only one company, though I didn't want to because I was already a businessman at that point in time. My mother forced me to apply for that job. And as luck would have it, since I didn't want that job, I got that job. And it was with ITC Limited. And I was the only accountant selected that whole year by ITC. So I go into this company. I spent time, doing boring accounting work because, very frankly, that was not something that I was very interested in. And then I met a very interesting, person who was the vice chairman of ITC at that point in time, who enlisted me into helping create what he called the new ITC. I found that very interesting. And, we actually created all the new wave one of all the new businesses that ITC, which is a BAT affiliate. At that point in time, we went into edible oils, we went into international trading, a number of other financial services. And last business that I set up there really for them was a company called ITC Infotech. And that's when I realized, I think the next 50 years for India really was going to be focused on tech, and I should therefore find a place there. But I must tell you one incident that shaped me, and this was while working in the financial services side of ITC, I did a very interesting and important deal for ITC, which was assisting someone else in the acquisition of India's first private sector bank. And there was no reward construct at ITC to recognize me for that. And one day I was sitting in my office and this deputy chairman of ITC walks in and he says, Keshav, well done. You've done a great job. And I know that we have no way to promote you or give you, any award. So, but I want to give you this gold medal. And he took out a 10-gram piece of gold, which he had paid for himself. And he couldn't stick it on my lapel or whatever, put it in my pocket. And he said, this is from me directly to you. Right. And that actually helped me understand how important it was to celebrate success, and more importantly, to put your arm around other people and motivate them. And that's something that I always do with others. Next job was, as I discovered that IT was the future, I looked around to see how I could get involved with IT. And I found this company called Sintel, Detroit headquartered, was one of the pioneers in the offshore space, but had lost its way somewhere along the way. And my mentor said, look, if you really want to, change trajectory, then you should take this very risky job. And I did that. I took this job, came into this company, and over the next few years, transformed it from an onshore centric company to a true global, kind of company. Took the market cap from 300 million to almost 4 billion, and later the company got sold to Atos. But again, I think, if you want to, get behind your passion, sometimes you have to take huge risks. And thereafter it is, WNS. Again, I just wanted to test the ability for me to turn around an asset, in a totally different space. I'd done it with IT services. This was business process. Again, a company that had done well, lost its way. Fortunately, with the help of some great people at this company, I've turned it around exceedingly well. It's now one of the leaders of the space. But most importantly, what I want to mention is that while all of this has gone well and I've learned continuously along the way, I think the most important lesson that I learned is, irrespective of how you do things, make sure that you're carrying people with you, make sure that they understand your vision, and more importantly, try to lead from the back and not from the front. So that's really my story. And as part of all of this, I'll mention that as we have been quite successful as a family, one of the things that we've also done is focused a lot on the community around us. We have created WNS Cares Foundation at WNS, which has been a trailblazer, won a lot of awards. We have personally been involved in creating this university, Ashoka University in Gurgaon. My family actually funded the first Akshaya Patra kitchen in Chennai, on the basis of which other kitchens have now been created in Chennai. And recently, we have been involved in founding the Museum of Art and Photography in Bangalore as well. So that's really my story for you.
Amazing. Sandeep, Keshav, that's wonderful. And I think all of us, the more we talk, we discover these things that we almost didn't know about each other. Keshav, I won't embarrass you or Amar finding out who actually was better at cricket. We'll leave for another day. But I do think that I think the both of you have talked about a couple of emerging themes, taking people with you, which is your teams. I think some of us were lucky enough to find, whether we deserved it or not, amazing mentors. Whether it was your vice chairman, or whether it was your boss, Sandeep, or whether it was, some of my board members who had invested in my company. And I think the last one that is quite topical to what we'll move to next is taking calculated risks. So let's just move, if we can, to the topics around AI and the topics around what we see as the opportunities in the UK tech ecosystem. And on the AI side, Keshav, maybe we can start with you, but you have a perspective at WNS about serving clients, which are clients potentially like Sandeep's old company and many others. Sandeep, you have a perspective of being a user yourself, and hopefully soon a founder, but also from a product mindset as opposed to a services mindset. And I'm sitting in the heart of Silicon Valley in Palo Alto, where it seems you can't even order a cappuccino without saying AI. As you see all the buzz and the hype, what are your high-level opinions on AI as a technology at this time? Is it overhyped? Is it underhyped? What are you seeing, and what are you telling your clients and your colleagues when they ask you about AI and Gen AI in particular? Keshav, can we start with you?
Sure. So, first and foremost, I see, any disruptive tech like generative AI really as a tailwind for our business and for the world at large, and not a headwind. And one of the things that, we focus our clients on is really to leverage some of these technologies and navigate really the opportunity and not, the threat. The other thing that, we are very focused on internally as a company, as well as, advising others also, is to clarify that at this point in time, complacency is really not an option, and that all businesses must embrace the potential of AI and generative AI with absolute clear expectations, a really skilled workforce, and a commitment to customer centricity. So that's how we are, dealing with this. And as a result of this, we believe that while in the short term, this technology, will disrupt some of our business models, in the longer term, from a business process side, it will actually dramatically increase the total addressable market for us, and that's very exciting for us. So in short, I will say that I believe that companies that are investing in generative AI today, maybe 3 years from now, there will be a little bit of disappointment in their minds in terms of what the outcome was as a result of that investment. But if they are not investing in it now, 3 years from now, I believe they will be terrified, at the marches or the leaps that people who invested have taken over them. So that's how I'll leave it.
Sandeep, I'd love to get your opinions as well. But Keshav, on what you just said, one of the things we keep telling our clients is whether you are right or wrong on identifying the right use cases, picking the right LLMs, figuring out the right, RAG techniques, it is important. It almost doesn't matter. What matters is, do you have a learning muscle right now? Because the technology is moving so fast that if you don't build the learning muscle, it almost doesn't matter what your expectations are. So we'll come back to expectations from CEOs on AI. But Sandeep, what's your take on the conversation and the dialogue around it in the market today, especially in the UK?
Sure. I think Keshav has touched on some very, very interesting aspects of what this change is about. I'll anecdotally quote, right? I was in a similar meeting recently, and one very renowned thought leader was discussing one-to-one in the forum as well. And we're saying, is this akin to the sixth revolution? We've heard about the industrial revolutions. We've heard about how we went from the late 18th century in this country where we live now, where the industrial revolution started. We went to steam, coal, and iron. We went to automobiles, and we went to having internet and the rise of the internet. So is this something akin to that, which is going to fundamentally change? And there is some truth in that, because every sort of 60 years, there's a shift change in how technology moves and change. Personally, I'm in the camp that believes that we're at the cusp of that revolution. Whether we can call it the next industrial revolution or not, I think it's going to fundamentally impact how various aspects, not just business and commerce, but society at large, how we consume and go about our day-to-day tasks, how education happens, for example. No, there's no aspect of life that won't be touched by AI. On the other side of it is, we're all from business world, and we talk about everything in economics language. Another recent good article and good thought leadership came from Sequoia Capital. You'd heard of that. Last year in September, they talked about a $200 billion hole, right? So where's the economics? We had so much money going into the infrastructure of AI. Where's the revenue coming out of it? That's just $200 billion is now middle of this year, in June, July time, 600 billion. But it's not stopping. I think we were kind of at that, hump where, in my view, suddenly the floodgates are going to open. As with any technology, it takes time to achieve equilibrium, to get maturity, to understand what it can and cannot do, what are the guardrails around risk, and so many others. But I would absolutely unequivocally echo what Keshav has said. For enterprises and large companies especially, this is a time to think a little long-term and take some short-term bets. And we can dig into this later, because I recently wrote a little article coming from my experience in the corporate world as to what are those areas that we need to sort of almost put a framework around it as an organization that can help us move fast. We can come to that. Talking about UK, now your question was specifically about UK. I think the UK-based companies, and I'll probably say a bit about Europe, there's a lot of appetite, but also this part of the world, as we know, there's a lot of regulation, right? And one of the big aspects around AI is how do we navigate through this change whilst being compliant, whilst being, making sure the risks are addressed. So I'd say the appetite in this
Right.
region is definitely there. There's a lot going on, perhaps not as quickly and rapidly as the other side of the pond, other side of the Atlantic, but definitely I think the momentum is as much there.
So actually, Sandeep, we'll come back to the UK tech ecosystem because I think and I think the audience would be very keen to understand that, what are some of the silver linings? Because the news around, the UK seems to be somewhat depressing sometimes. But I do think there's a very strong AI angle and an AI action report that is coming out any day now from the UK government and Matt this week or next week. We'll come back to that. Let's go back to kind of areas of opportunity more specifically. So between you, Keshav and Sandeep, you've covered so many different industries. When you're looking and speaking to large corporates or even mid-sized companies, and they say, fantastic, where do you see the biggest opportunity? What are the areas, whether it's call centers or whatever, what specific areas or processes are you saying that if it was your own personal money, you would apply AI there today?
Well, I can take a stab at that first. So first and foremost, I think it's important for us to spread this message that to all customers is, just get started first and foremost. If you want to, build on this transformation engine, if those who don't do it are going to be left behind. So that's the core of the message. And from our point of view, we are just fortunate that we have a number of POCs working with a number of clients, and we have almost 60 clients of ours who have now signed up, in terms of experimenting with GenAI solutions that are impacting, their solutions. So very simple. I mean, you look at travel. On the travel side, for example, GenAI is now helping, travel management companies to create very personalized kind of travel itineraries for corporate travelers. And what sets this capability apart is really the ability to proactively predict and prevent travel disruption, because the solution now takes disruption into account as well. In the case of shipping and logistics, we're helping the shipping industry understand and contextualize millions of inbound, kind of customer queries, whether they are email, text, or calls. And with hyperautomation and the LLM, kind of models specifically designed for back office processes in this industry, we're seeing businesses now start to resolve, workflows in an instant. So, speed is important. So I think, I could go on with many other examples in various other industries as well. But I think the important thing is what you're doing as a result of leveraging some of these models is going after, humongous amounts of data that's available, publicly, leveraging that model to make your agents and your people far more effective, smarter, far more productive, maybe cannibalizing your own revenue in the short term, but in the longer term, building huge amount of trust with your customers because they know that you're doing what is right for them. And a result of all of that is our getting after that larger addressable TAM that I spoke about, the whole addressable market. I just want to leave you with a single nugget of information here before I move on. If you look at the traditional offshore IT services space, we think that almost 70% of that space is properly penetrated, and there's a white space of about 30%. On the business process and the tech and ops side that which I belong to, we believe, as per Gartner, that hardly 25 or 30% of that space actually is penetrated. There is a 70% white space available, and it is technologies like generative AI that is going to make or force CEOs on the other side to decide what is core to them and what should be, handed out to a partner operating as an extension of their enterprise.
Right. Sandeep, obviously you have a deep background in shipping logistics, but I mean, and would love to hear if you see actual use cases there and beyond.
Sure. I'll give a little bit of sort of, context to the last sort of what we've seen in the last 18 months or 20 months now. October 2022, I still remember, when suddenly OpenAI launched and hit on the scene. What has happened since then is not short of a big tsunami whirlwind, and the way things are changing and moving, right? See, AI is not new. AI, natural language processing, rule-based decision making, graph-based, these things have been there for a decade. But what generative AI has unleashed is opportunity to identify use cases and applications like never before. I'd say, I think some of the things Keshav touched on, content creation, chatbots, call centers, these are getting fast commoditized. I'm sure you've heard of use cases where I won't name the company, but they sort of got rid of their call center pretty much. Hundreds of people that are gone now, and this whole sort of functional area is taken care by now AI. Now, what I see, the shift I see going from there is more into organizational business processes, which has been, an area approached by caution. There's always companies that are prime movers. There'll be cautious adopters. There'll be the laggards. And I think that message of embracing and finding which are the right areas for you. And I look at it from two perspectives. One is internally to your business and your go-to-market. What can be done to improve your processes using Gen AI, using AI? I think there's an external view as well, whereas there's all new ground of businesses being created using this capability. So before you know, sometimes your core business might be impacted by somebody else coming and eating your lunch because a new business model is being created. I mean, we're seeing all that happening now, and especially industries which are very heavy on content in media, legal, and the new business models that will evolve. So I guess my sort of two-part answer to that question is, one, moving from this commoditized type of use cases, which we talked about, to more nuanced, more workflow-based, more agentic AI. I think that's the word being used these days more and more. And taking that even further, where some concepts, and we can drill into that, Narry, but are monolithic applications of the past, are they even meaningful going forward? What would change?
These are SaaS applications that grew up in a different architecture, right?
Correct.
Exactly. So I think that's, one of the things, and I just wonder if you guys see things the same way. The way I've been talking to, companies about this is that AI allows you to do two kinds of things. One is do things what you're doing today much better. And then second is do things you never thought were possible. So if you're looking at, you've mentioned a lot of use cases, Sandeep and Keshav. One that I think is phenomenal and doesn't get well, maybe get some attention is healthcare. So, if we are a large company that we serve, pharmaceutical company, they're using it in the most amazing way to demonstrate these two areas. One is, yes, a lot of the stuff that they're doing in process automation and back office and legal, and they're looking at MSA contracts and putting them in LLMs and giving them a risk assessment of this MSA versus that MSA, which is what lawyers do today in the legal counsel. What is fascinating is they've accelerated for the RSV drug for cancer. They've accelerated their clinical trial by 70%. Now, in healthcare, as we all know, especially as our parents and others get older, the R&D process takes 10 years. It's one of the most expensive things, and 90% fails. And so one of the things that they've set up with a couple of technology partners is 45 digital twins to discover new molecules for Parkinson's and things like this. Now, you could do that. It would take 50, 60 years. But I think so there are some very profound, the point I think is, as you both have said, one is it's about practical use cases. Two, it's about augmentation, not replacing people so far. Three, it's about process and process redesign. But perhaps more, even as importantly, is there's money in AI and Gen AI today, as opposed to talking about waiting for a year or two, Keshav, as you're saying. Let me just maybe ask a different question on the flip side. What do you see are the biggest barriers and challenges that companies are facing in terms of adopting AI?
Sandeep, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll take it first. Yeah, I guess some of these challenges are more organizational and people challenges, change management challenges, right? And again, I've something I alluded a bit earlier to, as from a corporation perspective, from an enterprise perspective, what are the issues I see? Sort of categorized in 4 or 5 areas. One is, I call it raising the overall AI IQ of the organization, because it shouldn't remain just with a few people who are thinking about use cases. I think, and then with the boards. The boards are asking hey, what are you doing about AI? But really need to have a skin in the game. Everybody in the organization, to whatever extent they can, right? So that's one, raising the overall IQ. Second is, it sounds very tactical, but I think it's very important. is a data strategy. And I'm very personally passionate about that because see, ultimately, technologies like AI, they work on data, because that's what it is about. And many organizations we've seen in the last decade and a half, we have moved from sort of data warehouses to data lakes to mesh and fabric and whatever you call it. But having a sort of a grounded strategy around that, the quality, hygiene, synthetic data, whatever you want to call it. So these factors become important. So that's the second guardrail. The third is making sure that across the organization there's brainstorming. There's 20 things you can do with AI. What's the most important? What is being addressed and being critical to your company from a strategic perspective, from a competitive perspective, from a change perspective? I think these discussions need to happen. And then lastly, I would say all of that sort of fits into some sort of a governance model in terms of risk, privacy. You can't go away from that regulation, and safeguarding your data at the same time, because there's a lot of big thought process going on now with the foundational models are there, but how do you make them specific to your enterprises? How do you go with SLMs, small language models? How do you use
Right.
good RAG techniques instead of building your own RAG, which takes time, it's complex? How do you use special purpose organization? Again, I'm not sort of alluding to where I'm going with this startup, but how do you use the specialized techniques that will help you move very quickly in some of the applications? So I think there are multiple 4 or 5 areas that big organizations need to think about. And I talk about big organizations, but big or small, there has to be some sort of a guiding framework that will help you get moving very quickly. But the first point I mentioned is super critical, raising the AI IQ.
Yeah, in fact, very well said, Sandeep. In fact, as a user, you obviously have much more experience of, the kind of issues that you guys go through inside the user community. But I can tell you that a lot of the people that we interact with, the first question they ask is, no, like, where do I start, right? I think that itself becomes a big problem quite often. We tell them, look, just start somewhere and start today, right? Get someone to help you with an area to go after and just start with it. The second is, there is this impression a lot of people have that the other company, is doing much more than them. I think one of the things that we keep telling everyone is, listen, this is again, a great equalizer, this technology, because frankly, everyone is in the same place. Everyone is starting, and a few of them may make a lot more noise, do much more social media around some of the impact that they have created with generative AI. But the reality is, we're all in the same place, and therefore, the ability to dramatically leverage some of these technologies, experiment with it, and come up with great outcomes is possible. The third thing is, the challenge is a lot of companies are looking at who should I align with. And when I say align with, it means in terms of the technology providers. Do I want to go with a Microsoft solution? Do I want to go with an OpenAI solution? Do I want to go with somebody else? And there's this lot of discussion on what is going to happen to my proprietary data going into that model, right? So companies like ours address that very carefully in terms of managing, the confidentiality and the data and things like that. But I would say that these are the 3 key areas that we're seeing as challenges beyond what Sandeep spoke about. And the most important thing that we advise a lot of people is start training your people in terms of, the basics of AI and generative AI, because whether you like it or not, the world is going to move to this model, and anything that you interact with will have a flavor of this over a period of time.
I mean, I think that's spot on. One of the things, the last point you mentioned, Keshav, which I think is talent. You can upscale and you can rescale and things like this, but I think all of us know that genuine AI or even Gen AI talent is so scarce, it's so rare. And the truth is, the best AI talent does not want to work for a large incumbent corporate. I mean, we can tiptoe around it, but that's not where your career is going to thrive.
Sure.
How do corporations get over that talent mismatch?
For me, it is first and foremost placing your bets in terms of, who are your partners that you want to have, one. Second thing is train the hell out of your people first, right? Start somewhere. For example, of our 60,000 people, we've already trained about 23,000 people in various models. such that if nothing else, they are very clearly capable of understanding the impact of some of these changes and what's going to happen to how they actually run their processes over a period of time, right? That's the second thing. The third thing is, I think, governments, academia, and companies will have to come together to create more of these kind of talent flow that's available. Because at this moment in time, I think a lot of these people are focused on going to certain kind of companies, the larger companies, or creating startups of their own. But over a period of time, I think once the hype dies down and becomes much more practical in terms of people saying, I now want to monetize all these billions of dollars of investments that I've made, that's when the chickens are going to come to roost, right? Yeah. And that's when this talent is going to have to make a choice of how they want to live the next 20, 30, 40 years, because not every company is going to be successful in this space. Right. So I think each of us have to take accountability for our own talent first, and then generally elevate the talent positioning in the communities that we live in, and finally work with the ecosystem to build more of these people.
I mean, the ecosystem point is important. We'll come back when we talk about the UK tech ecosystem. I think most of the people on the call would know that the UK government is about to release the UK AI Action Report, and all of us expect that a pretty big part of that would be either some definition of reskilling or skilling of AI talent, and or hopefully including some AI or exceptional talent immigration visa benefits for attracting that talent. So I'm sure we'll talk about that when we come to it. Sandeep, you talked about data.
Let's not forget, so Narry, I just want to let's not forget, even now at this point in time, while there's a lot of doom and gloom and whatever on the UK, in this area, while it may be much lower compared to the others, the UK is still the fourth in terms of overall pecking order in terms of AI and generative AI investments across the world.
I think that's such a good reminder, because we tend to get sometimes a little bit, too self-critical on how things are. It's such a good reminder that there's not just a silver lining, but there's actually some sunlight out there. In terms of kind of the other challenges, I'll share an observation and get a reaction from you both. Is we are finding that there are CEOs that have, a risk appetite and some that don't. But one of the most amazing things we're finding is sometimes the expectations are not too low, but they're too high. In other words, we've worked with clients the CEO, for some reason or the other, has gotten such AI religion, or maybe their son or daughter works at Google and reminds them of it, that they come back and basically saying, I want to do a real-time pricing of all my commodities worldwide. And we're like, well, that's wonderful, but that's almost too complicated. And on the other hand, people are saying, I'm not so sure where to start. Somebody, I'm in California, and somebody once mentioned that there are, 16,000% more car accidents than are reported about Tesla self-driving accidents. And yet when that happens, it feels like the world is coming to an end. So is there a narrative and expectation mismanagement about what AI can do and not do that needs to be better told?
Yeah, I can go first, Narry. I think, I'm grinning in the background because you use the word hype, right? I mean, there is definitely a hype, and there is surely, and I think that is tempered down a bit. I think with as the reality sinks in, as the equilibrium is coming in. But I've been on the other side of the desk where I've seen boards super, I guess, charged, I would say is the right word, with AI. That some really amazing ideas come up, but they're not practical at this point in time, just because those kind of use cases are not mature. There is not enough data. There is not the synthetic data. I alluded to that earlier. And that's a very big aspect, especially with very nuanced use cases, while keeping in the guardrails of the safety and privacy. How do you create an AI, which is ultimately, which is called it probabilistic, or it not is always not deterministic? How do you build something that is accurate, right? So there's a reality. There's a reality getting over hallucinations. There's a reality getting over how much you can rely on AIs. There's a reality about explainability of what the AI is telling you. And by the time it comes to more maturity, and time will tell which applications are those, I think, in my view, the hype will also temper down. So while there are boards which are very, very enthusiastic, which they should remain, there should be also, I think Keshav said very nicely that the training part of it, especially some of the middle management, people who have control over the purse strings, people who have control over the projects and what gets picked up and funded, they should elevate their knowledge and learning so they can be more guided to their management, to the boards, as to which are the things to bet on. And that's certainly my suggestion to the senior leaders I'm talking to.
So
Yeah,
let's.
I would just add.
Sorry, Keshav.
Sorry, Nari. I just add that we shouldn't forget in the middle of all of this that ultimately, we have to keep focusing on business solutions and less on the tech stack, right? Quite often we become so focused on the technology part of everything, we forget that ultimately all of this is supposed to be subservient to human beings and to us living a better life. So I think there are different needs to be delivered by different stakeholders. I mean, I run a public company, and I therefore need to be careful and calibrated in terms of the kind of solutions that I'm creating. I can't go and do something crazy or recommend things to my clients as a result of which I can't meet my next quarter or I can't meet my shareholder expectations. So I need to be very calibrated about some of those things. At the same time, if you're a government and you're investing in all of this, again, you need to be very calibrated about what are you trying to get out of this. I'll give you a simple example of an interaction we had in Dubai last week when we met as a NASSCOM team separately with the powers that be in the UAE. And one of the things that stood out, I mean, UAE is the first country in the world to actually have an AI minister, right? And he came and said something very interesting. He said, we don't have much crime in the UAE. But a few months ago, and they're adopting, AI at scale across, the country in different areas. And he said they had a robbery apparently in the gold souk, and the gold souk is unprotected, right? There are gold shops on the ground floor, and then there are the gold exporters and all upstairs, and there's really no security. And some smart Alex landed up wearing masks and apparently stole gold from a few of the shops. And the AI model actually, helped them find those people in 7 minutes. Because though these people were wearing masks, the AI solution actually was able to track movements of the people. And based on that, they found out, where these people were. So it's these simple examples, that we need to, keep focusing on in order to make sure that all of these technologies, including AI or generative AI, ultimately put man behind the mission.
I agree. I think it's really well said. And so let's move to the UK tech ecosystem and what gives us hope. I'll just mention one thing that I think the tech stack, you're absolutely right. It's about business problems. It's about helping humanity. But I will say the one thing that I worry about a little bit is, especially given I'm in California right now, is when I think about, the Magnificent Seven or whatever you want to call them, and the fact that their collective market cap of 16 trillion is probably the third largest country in the world. This is just a personal opinion, I worry a lot that a lot of what the rest of the humanity will be seeing in AI is probably controlled by no more than 100 people. And probably 70 of them are within 10 square miles of where I'm sitting right now. I worry about that kind of consolidation for anything, especially as powerful as AI. So I think there is something to be said about the tech stack, Keshav, which is whether it's regulators, whether it's this or that, we are all entrepreneurs. But at some point, it feels like you need some kind of checks and balances for something that is like fire. It could be good, it could be bad. On the UK tech side, exactly as we've been talking about, what gives you hope? What are you optimistic about? What is UK's unique potential place in the larger tech ecosystem?
Well, I'll go first. But first of all, I just want to add on to one more element in your earlier statement, Narry. I think you made it extremely well, and I think as business leaders and as citizens, we all have to be extremely conscious of this. There are 7,000 languages that people speak in this world, and only 20% really speak English. But all LLMs, really cater to that 20%. So there's this big opportunity of the 80% that this technology must carry over a period of time, right? And in this whole scheme of things, now let's look at the UK. The UK created that English language. So I think they have a very, strong positioning at this point in time. Like I said, even today, though they don't make too much of noise about it, in terms of the whole AI and Gen AI, stacking across the world after the US, China, the UK actually is number 3, right? And if you look at the Grant Thornton's recent report that came out in 2024, there are now currently almost 971 India-owned companies in the UK, and that's up from 954 in 2023, and delivering a combined revenue of 50.5 billion. And many of these companies are talking about technology, talking about making investments in this area, wanting to get involved with the startup kind of ecosystem and things like that. So while I think there's huge potential for the UK being the gateway to Europe as it is, in spite of all the gloom and doom, I think there's huge hope for the future. The other thing I'll say is London as a great city of the world cannot be replaced in a long time. So I think it's only a matter of time before which London will come back and the UK will come back, in a huge way. And you can see from the kind of interest being taken in London Tech Week, as well as some of the other events that are being spoken about, this whole area of AI, generative AI, and any other technology is front and center in the minds of everyone, including policymakers.
Absolutely.
My take on this narrative is I think Keshav has touched on a few points, but I think if you look at the educational aspect, right, people undermine, we have Oxbridge plus Imperial, 3 of the top 10 universities in the world here in the UK. Arguably, they're not sort of geolocated like Stanford and Berkeley and USCF, but it's still a huge brain capital that happens here. Many of you have heard of Demis Hassabis, who's now, DeepMind Google is doing that work. There's such a incredible talent here. A lot of that talent, arguably, there's a bit of a brain drain going towards the Silicon Valley. But I do feel, in addition to the point that Keshav mentioned, that it's equal balancer geographically as well. UK balances out what's happening in the Middle East, in APAC, in many ways. And I think that can be serving as a good, impetus and momentum as how we can take. And we're always a bit cautious. We're not sort of jumping in that Silicon Valley ecosystem. But equally, I think that's a more sustained, more measured, more mature growth that I see happening in this region. I mean, we can talk about Brexit, we can talk about political angles as well, but which is not necessarily the discussion. But I think there's enough going on, which I think is a good stimulus in the space of AI within the UK. I'm very hopeful.
I think that's really, really good to hear, because I think fundamentally we're glass half full on the UK. Not saying it won't be challenging, but I think if you look at the latest budget, the amount of time AI was mentioned, I think was 37. Somebody from my team told me that. I'm not so sure if that's right or wrong, but so I think that's the good news. However, if you look under the hood, there are 2 or 3 amazing opportunities. There's skills for England. Keshav, to your point about training the hell out of your people, right? If skills for England can actually be scaled up, that's pretty amazing. I think the number of AI-related startups around London within 100 miles is 1,305. I mean, there's an incredible density of AI companies. But I think there are issues around, kind of the regulation. There are issues around kind of how you allow talent to come in an environment where things seem to be anti-immigrant, irrespective of talent. So I think it will be, some challenges need to be overcome. But fundamentally, UK has an incredible right to play, I think, in this ecosystem. What about Indiaspora and us as a community, whether it's the UK or beyond? Is there a unique role for us to play, given the amount of tech talent and other capabilities we're bringing?
I'll go on that one first, Narry. So 100%. I think what India is doing, particularly in India, in the Indian geography, is phenomenal. I think the amount of talent in terms of trained AI engineers or workers is on the rise, undoubtedly. Entrepreneurs, risk-taking entrepreneurs with amazing ideas, not just for the Indian market. In my personal network, I probably know at least about between 5 and 10. This number keeps growing every time. Individuals who have relocated, to build companies in this ecosystem from India, and they straddle on both India and the UK and Europe. So I think the ecosystem is there. You may have heard about the India AI mission, which is the government-funded body, which is, I think, doing some incredible work. I do feel we have lots going for us. One is the sheer number. I mean, undoubtedly, we have a large number of trained talent that is available. Secondly, I think there's a lot more risk appetite, not just about Indians doing great stuff outside of India, but equally inside India. And to me, that fuses and that kind of lays the foundation for a much broader ecosystem working within. I think Indiaspora themselves are doing so much amazing stuff. I mean, this tech talk is one of the examples, but the stuff that I've seen it come through Indiaspora in the last so many years, couple of years, especially in the UK, it's just mind-boggling. And I'm very, very bullish on our colleagues, Indian colleagues, and our diaspora as well as Indiaspora in the coming year.
No, I'd just add a few more points that I think I totally agree with Sandeep. I think India has a huge and important role to play in how all of this shapes up, for the longer term. And India has realized that. So if you look at it, we've taken a very global and collaborative view of AI innovation. And we have actually, from India, established a number of key partnerships with other, kind of tech leading nations. We are aware of the Indo-US initiative on, critical and emerging technologies, the US-India Artificial Intelligence Initiative, the Indo-German Science and Technology Center. So we're not trying to do things by ourselves. We're actually collaborating with everyone else, which is a real smart thing to do. I think the other thing is that the Indian diaspora itself, our mindset and the collaborative kind of philosophy means we are thinking much, much bigger about how technology can help with business issues, but more importantly, can also help with much bigger issues. Look, we are at the forefront of discussions on climate, on things that are happening that matter to all of us. And I think ultimately technology has to be used not just for business or to make us smarter or to make processes smarter, but really to make the world a better place to live in. And I think therefore India is taking that leap of faith. The third thing I'll say is having been privy to a number of meetings through NASSCOM and even a recent meeting at NASSCOM, India is focusing a lot on the local and regional languages to create, kind of large language models that can enable, 80% of the population who live in the, tier 3, tier 4, kind of areas. Again, this is going to be very empowering in the long term. And if you look at the kind of investments being made in deep tech and AI, there are almost like 600 AI companies now created in India. It augurs very well. And finally, I must say, organizations like Indiaspora, what MR and his entire team are doing, this chat that we are doing, the number of interactions that they have across the globe, this is actually positioning India as a force, in terms of the larger discussion on any important issue across the world. So my heartiest congratulations to all of them.
Absolutely. Well said. I think that's fantastic. I will open it up to any audience Q&A if we have some. And while we process those, Keshav, to your point, and Sandeep, to yours, the one stat I found astounding was when I left India in the early 90s, 1992, about 85 or 90% of all IIT grads left the country, whether it was the US, UK, Canada, mostly. Last year, 16% left. So that talent has decided that the place to make a career and the place to become an amazing leader or a philanthropist is India. And that just tells you something about the so-called brain drain, right? So I don't know from the Indiaspora team if there's any questions that we want to take. Happy to do so. Happy to also throw out a couple of rapid fire questions. Nina, do you and the team see any questions?
Well, I actually have a question. So, and it's about the UK economy. You know, historically, UK has always lagged in productivity. So, do you think that AI can help UK become more productive? And how would the government go about doing this?
I think from my perspective, I think the first and foremost to your first question, AI is going to make all of us far more productive. And at the same time, probably it will help us achieve that, 4-day, weekday that we all keep talking about, and Europe is so famous for talking about, because you'll be so productive on those 4 days that, you can really relax and have time to think on the other 3 days. I think that's important. I recently spoke at Cambridge, and I met the master there, and I said, why are people making such a big noise about this work-life balance and this, that, and the other? And one of the things he reminded me about was, he said the UK has become such a great place because, he said, if you look at innovation and you look at the Nobel laureates coming out of some of these colleges, he said the key thing that they've always focused on is keeping some time to think, right? So first and foremost, I think this will make us productive, hopefully allow us to spend time in a better fashion on the weekends and whatever. And beyond that, I think what the government is looking to do in terms of just creating more financial muscle behind this, creating specific programs where AI investments must go in, and encouraging more talent to come into this country through the universities and through these interesting visa programs to invest in this area is going to make a big difference for the UK.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Keshav. And Narry, you were saying that we're always glass half full, but actually, if you actually look at the UK, and if you look at the amount of foreign investment that comes into the UK, we have the highest amount of foreign investment within Europe, and also UK has produced the highest number of unicorns, within Europe. So we shouldn't really knock UK too much. And everything you've said here actually gives me a lot of hope that despite the budget and the doom and the gloom, the UK may in time come out of it and becomes great again.
I think just one thing to add, Nina, to what Keshav just said is one of the best use cases we can think about for AI, and maybe even machine learning, not Gen AI, is the UK government. It's where productivity is waiting to be unleashed. For anybody on this call that has tried to get a permit for real estate, try to get a commercial license to set up a business, it is, let's just call it character building. And I think if we can streamline some of those processes with almost 600 or 700 billion pounds of spend, that could be one of the easiest, not easiest, one of the first places I would look.
Yeah, but it's getting the government to do that, isn't it, Narry?
Indeed. Any other Nina questions from our audience?
Amita, have you got any questions? Because I'm not.
Yeah, I see one. That's given the growing interest in AI for streamlining operations, what role do you see AI playing in improving operational bottlenecks or optimizing business flows?
Sandeep, any examples from the shipping?
We touched on that a little bit earlier. I mean, I think the shift in the next 18, 24 months will move from those commodity applications to more operational workflows. And I think as that happens, I think the back office applications, and I say back office in terms of financial processes, HR processes, productivity is the main focus, right? As long as you're doing things that are reliable, safe, within the guardrails of safety, privacy and regulation, AI will come into those more and more and more. As well as in the front office, go to market. I mean, I see AI playing a big role in supply chain. I call that front office because it's just behind your sales processes and behind your go-to-market processes. And I have that expertise in the supply chain area, so I can say a little bit more emphatically that AI is definitely going to come and play a big role in that space in terms of streamlining supply chains, in terms of making decisions that are taking into account the bigger network level problems and so on and so forth. So clearly, a lot is coming. We're poised for change, and bottlenecks is a good way of putting it. Not just bottlenecks, taking cost out and making things more efficient.
And I'll just add, balance, great expectations with some grounded realities, and treat AI as a collaborator, not a competitor.
Yeah.
Well said. Nina, I know
We're at time. There's one question, I think, which will be really good, but there was a comment in the chat that did say "Make Britain Great Again" when you all were talking about UK and in terms of elevating that. But the question is, how can AI help to solve real world problems such as lack of infrastructure, poor quality public services, pollution, corruption, etc.?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. Nina just gave this great example, or Narry did, about government. I think the biggest use of AI and generative AI is going to be government, frankly, across the world. Just look at the UK. NHS could be a great user. Years ago, we all spoke a lot about smart cities. Where did that movement go? The reality is we've got the devices, we've got the scanners, we've got companies like Mobileye that are actually having these these machinery now capable of sending real-time information on our roads, on our street lights, on many things back to a central kind of repository. And the ability for AI and generative AI models to just use all of this and very quickly provide fast solutions for people to come back and resolve some of the issues that are being pointed out is very, very high. So I actually think that as technology keeps evolving, we will use it to do more good for ourselves, and in every space. I spoke about government and just smart cities, but healthcare is going to be completely revolutionized by this. I've invested in a company that has created the world's first companion robot. 4 years ago, people laughed at me. This year, it's doing great sales. But the data that that company has now aggregated is like gold to great companies like Google and the others. So I really think that everything that we dabble in leveraging these models is going to help improve human life long term.
really well said.
One small point I would make in terms of paraphrasing what Keshav just mentioned is, I call it the convergence of physical and the digital. Infrastructure essentially, there are things you have to do with hands and lay down roads and make whatever better that to support. That physical doesn't go away; it has to. But the convergence of the physical and the digital, where governments will be waking up and in many ways be forced to make some of those decisions of the pressure coming from public-private partnerships will be that pressure, right? And that physical-digital collaboration and convergence, the physical robots that you mentioned, as they come into our lives in the homes and companion bots, they're not going to work by themselves. There's a whole digital element behind it and the infrastructure behind it that needs to be put in place. So I think the natural momentum and the pressure on the ecosystem will lead to the good. I personally think.
Excellent. Well, I know we're at time, Nina, so perhaps a good time to kind of thank our great speakers, Keshav, Sandeep. Thank you so much for your insights, your personal stories. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think it can seem a little bit overwhelming to listen about all these different use cases, technology, tech stack, ecosystem. The advice I got from a wonderful mentor was, in times like these, you just need two things. You need courage and you need curiosity. And I think those two might be the only things that I can hold on to. Thanks, Nina, to you and the Indiaspora team. I'm sure there'll be many more tech talks. By next week, the LLMs would have changed again. So maybe we have another one of these. But thank you so much for joining. And I'm sure this will be recorded, Nina, and people can...
It is going to be recorded. It's going to be on YouTube as well. And we will definitely circulate the recording to all the speakers. And Narry, I'd like to thank you as well for narrating this session. Absolutely fascinating to listen to the three of you. Thank you once again for being our members and also for such a fascinating tech talk.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Narry. Thank you, Indiaspora team.
Thanks.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.